everybody, this is Paige from Mosaic Moments, and today I am doing a demo on the Clover Die set. So this set comes with 3 different dies. The largest one measures 4x4 squares on the grid paper, and as you can see it has that looped line, and this is the die you're going to use to fit your larger photographs here. I'm using it to frame my portraits since that's what fits within, or these photos fit within this larger space here. And you will want to pay attention when you're making the page of which way that loop part is going. I'll talk about that more during the demo. This set also comes with the 2x4 sized die that fits in between the 4x4 dies, and as you can see those lines connect together to make one big ring shape in the end. And this does have smaller space, so be prepared to use photographs that can fit within those small areas. And last, this set comes with a 2x2 decorative die that fits right in the middle. Alright, now that you've been introduced to the dies, let's get started. I'm starting off with the largest die in the set. This is the 4x4 Clover die. And of course, I'm using it to cut this piece of cardstock, and I'm going to roll it through my machine. As you can see, I have the die in at an angle, and one of our tips is for better cuts, put the die in at an angle, and it puts less pressure when you roll it through the machine. Alright, so the piece you want to save is the frame that sits inside the die, and if it does get stuck, you can use a pair of tweezers and poke it through the hole, and the whole frame should come out just like that. Next, I'm going to cut with the 2x4 die. By the way, with both the 4x4 and 2x4, I am cutting them 4 times. Alright, again I have the die in at an angle with the same color cardstock. I personally like to use the same color paper for all the die cuts when I'm using a frame kind of die like this one. Alright, so I have this piece, and as you can see I use my tweezers again to pull it out, and it's very easy. Last, I'm going to be cutting with the 2x2 die just once, so that's quick. And of course I have the same color cardstock again to make this little die cut. And the nice thing about the 2x2 die is you can just use it by itself without the Clover dies as a nice decorative touch for other scrapbook pages. So this is a really nice decorative die. And again, of course, you're going to keep that frame piece that sits within the die itself, and you can discard the filler pieces for now. Alright, once you have all your pieces cut, you can begin gluing them on your grid paper. Right here I'm using my Re-positionable glue. This is the Herma Dotto Dispenser, and it's one of our favorite adhesives. And you want to glue the back carefully around the corners and around the edges. Just keep in mind that this is a very thin die cut, and it could be bent or torn very easily, so take your time when you're gluing the back. And I have talked about placing a base piece down with cardstock in some of my past videos, but this time I'm trying something new and just placing the frame right on the grid paper. Take your time as you do this. Make sure that those grid lines on the top and left side are completely covered. So to save on time, I did glue the back of the rest of the frames already. Okay, so the base piece is nice if you feel like you can't get these frame pieces on the grid paper correctly without being warped. I recommend using a base piece for this size. You can cut it with the 4x4 die in set A. But again, make sure you take your time gluing it on the grid paper because you'll see it might be bent or warped in some odd spaces. I know I sped up the video, but I felt like I had to take some extra time to make sure those were all on the grid paper straight. Alright, this is the 2x4 die, and again I glued it carefully, and as you can see it lines up with the 4x4 dies, and it's going to look really neat in the end. This die I wasn't worried about using a base piece. It's a little bit stronger because it's a smaller die, and it has those 2 lines in the middle, I think, to make it a little more sturdy. So alright, I just again see now I'm I keep having to readjust it so it covers those grid lines correctly. So again, take your time. See, I have to do it again. So just so you know, guys can see, I don't get it down perfectly every time on the first try. So that's why the base piece is nice, because the base piece is this solid cardstock you can just stick right on the grid paper, and then these kind of dies can line up on it with a little bit better, versus on the grid paper I feel like I have to take more time to line it up. But again, if you don't want to waste a lot of your paper, this is still an option. And now you can see on this left side, on the top left, it makes a circle shape, and hint why it's called the Clover Dies, because it makes this nice four clover shape. 4-leaf clover, I should say. I forgot the leaf. Alright, I have this last 2x4 die here. And by the way, if you want to see an example, if you're new to Mosaic Moments and don't know what I mean by base piece, I'm going to put a link to the Sweetheart die tutorial on the top right here, and I talk about that and talk about the base pieces in that video, and that die is kind of similar to this one, so go check it out. Alright, this is the 2x2 die again. It's pretty strong, so I don't feel like I need a base piece for the 2x2 sizes. And it fits right in the middle, and you can see this amazing clover design. So for this video, I'm doing something a little bit different. This time I decided to show the die machine right next to my layout, so you can hopefully see where I place everything better. Let me know in the comments if you prefer it this way or if you prefer it the other way, like in my other videos where I show the die machine totally separate from the layout. I just want to know which one is easier for you to help you understand how these dies work. Alright, so first I'm starting off with the 4x4 clover die, and as you can see I just cut around the part I need, and you do want to make sure, so this paper is going to be placed in that top left corner, so I made sure that the corner part of this die was also on the top left of my pattern paper. Of course, I'm going to roll it through the machine. I recommend using washi tape if you need, so your paper doesn't shift around, especially if you have a pattern like mine where it matters which direction it's going. If you have any extra pieces left in the die, you can just stick them out with a pair of tweezers and discard it. Alright, so now I put down my repositionable glue, and I'm going to place it right inside here. And since this frame die can be warped, you may need to take the time to make sure it's placed right next to that solid piece. I am placing some extra glue down to make sure this frame part stays down extra secure. There was a tiny gap between my pattern paper and the frame on the top here, so I decided to secure that frame a little bit better with some extra glue. Alright, now I think I have the pattern paper placed in that space really well, so I'm going to continue on with the 2x4 clover die. And of course I'm paying attention and making sure that this little part at the end here is in the same direction as I'm going to place it right on my grid paper. So take your time, make sure, especially if you're using a paper, if you were using a solid color cardstock, it wouldn't matter which direction these cuts are going, but I have a specific pattern in my paper that it matters which direction it's going for me. So I'm taking the time making sure that my die cut is going in the same direction as I'm going to place it on the grid paper. So I hope that all made sense. If not, leave me a question in the comments below. Alright, now I have the 4x4 clover die again, and this time I'm going to make sure I get that bottom left corner in. And as you can see, I put the die in the same direction as it will be going on the grid paper. Alright, and again, I cut around that corner piece so I don't have to use up all of my pattern paper. That would be kind of a waste to use paper I don't need for my page. So just a tip there for if you're worried about using up all your pattern paper. And the nice thing is, if you decide to make a second layout, there should be some extra paper for the other side. Again, I see a little bit of a gap here. As you can see, this is more of an issue with the larger die. The smaller die, I really didn't have to readjust. All right. It's just a simple fix because I know some of you talk about there might be a little bit gap between your paper and the frame die part. So this is one way to fix that, is just make sure it's extra secure on your grid paper. And sometimes there might be a little bit of a gap on some of these dies because when you put it through the die machine kind of warps your cuts. So keep that in mind. That's why it's important to place the die in at an angle and be sure your die machine is not having too much pressure. Obviously, too little pressure is not good because your dies won't cut through all the way. But if too much pressure, people find that their cuts are really warped. So keep that in mind when you're cutting. Alright, I have that 2x4 die again, and I did make sure that it was going the same direction as I have it on the grid paper here. Alright, so I'm speeding up the video here because I think you get the idea. So this time I'm at the bottom right, so I made sure the frame covered that bottom right of the pattern paper as well. Of course, roll it through the machine, glue the back, and make sure it fits within that 4x4 space. And if it doesn't fit perfectly, you can add some extra glue to give that frame die extra security and strength. Or more stability, I should say, to make sure it stays right next to that pattern paper so there isn't a gap. Alright, I have my last cut here, and of course it's going to go on the top right, so definitely make sure whenever you cut that the dies are going in the direction you want it to be placed on the grid paper. So pay attention to that, because that is very annoying when you cut it and then realize, oh, this isn't the right direction. Alright, I'm getting to my final cut with this 2x4 die. Alright, so I have it placed in the right direction. I'm going to cut it through the machine and glue it down. And I'm done with that outer part of my Clover design. So for the last part of this demo, I'm finally adding my photographs, which is one of the most exciting parts to making a page, in my opinion, because you see it all coming together. Alright, so I'm using the 4x4 Clover die here, and you see I have the loop on the part of the photograph, or on the side of the photograph, that's going to match up with how it is on the grid paper. So pay attention and make sure you cut your photograph the correct direction you're going to place on the grid paper, because you don't want a sideways or upside down photograph. So pay attention to which way that loop is going on the 4x4 die. Alright, so a neat trick you can do, so on one part of the photograph I cut with the 4x4 die, right? And the photograph I have here is the other portion that was left over. So you won't maybe be able to do this on every photograph, but I had two photographs today I could do this on, where I could place half of the, or a larger portion of the photograph on the 4x4 size, and then the rest of it can fill in the 2x4 size Clover die, which I'm doing right here. I'm not going to fill in the middle. I'm going to use different photos for that, but I did fill it in with that fun brick wall. So that's just one fun trick you can do, and I'm going to do it for this portion of my page as well. Again, pay attention to which way that loop's going. So this time I made sure that loop line, I'll call it, it was on the bottom left corner of the photograph. Of course, I glue it down and stick it within my frame, and then I'm going to use the rest of the die, or excuse me, I'm going to cut the rest of the photo with the 2x4 die, and make sure also with the 2x4 die it's also going the right direction. So I made sure that that leaf center part was pointed down, and on the top part the leaf part was pointed up. So you want to pay attention to which direction the 2x4 dies are going as well. Pretty much throughout the pages, make sure you plan your photographs beforehand, and also make sure that when you're cutting it like I'm doing now, I made sure that loop is facing, or it's pointing toward the bottom right of my photograph. Alright, so this time I didn't have any portrait-oriented photographs or vertical photographs to do that same technique as before. I looked for some but didn't have any. But, you know, if you can't do that, that's fine. Then you just do what I'm doing here. You have a couple photos to fill in that 4x4 clover space. Alright, so this time I made sure that loop line was on the top left of my photograph. Okay, so now to fill in the other 2x4 spaces, I'm just using a separate photograph altogether of one with no one in there, just the wall. Alright, and actually then it kind of still looks like one big photograph, even though if you really looked at it you can tell it's not, but because there's that wall throughout all the photos here, it looks like if you glanced at it, it kind of looks like it's still the same photograph continuing on. So that's two tricks there. You can fill in the 4x4 and the 2x4 spaces with one photograph, and if you don't have that, you can use all separate photographs. It's just a fun little trick there. And of course with the 2x4 dies, they don't have a lot of space, so I don't recommend using portraits unless you have a person that's really, really tiny, really, really far away. So you might cut them in an awkward way. That's my opinion anyway. I usually like to save these small spaces for your more decorative dies, such as this wall. So I'm pointing out the 2x2 die here. So there's those 4 corner spaces. I'm going to fill them in, but if you look at it, the grid lines don't show through it. Now you can see the grid lines in the middle part, but on these 4 corners that I'm gluing down now, if you wanted to, you can have that grid paper showing through. I'm going to cover them up so it goes with my 2x4 spaces, but it's just a cool detail, especially if you have one of our collection grid papers where there's a pattern to it. You can show that. I'm going to fill in these leaf shapes, I'll call them that, with the 2x4 Clover die. And so behind this wall, there's some scenery, and so I'm going to show that a little bit within those leaf-shaped spaces. And again, you want to make sure that your 2x4 die is pointed in the right direction as you want it to be on the grid paper, so your photos won't be sideways or upside down. This time I made sure that leaf shape was pointed towards the left side of my layout, so that way I wouldn't have to place it upside down or anything like that, or have to redo it. We don't want to ever do that, right? Alright, have that one down. This time I'm going to have it placed upside down, so I'm getting that bottom for a 2x4 Clover die, so the leaf is pointed towards the bottom. And if you haven't noticed, I am using a crease pad to cut my photographs. The crease pad is great. It may not always cut through paper, so I would be careful about that. But for photographs, a lot of times if you've used the dies, you know it might leave an indent. But if you use the crease pad, your photographs cut smooth without the indent, which is great. Alright, this is my final cut with the leaf shapes, and of course with this one I did make sure that the die was pointed up so it can fit in that space perfectly. Now I'm done with that, so I'm going to fill in the rest of this middle 2x2 Clover die. I am using a bit of the pattern paper that I used to make the outer edges, so placing it in the middle here just will tie the page together. It's a nice simple detail, and I'm also using it to fill in these really tiny triangle spaces, so make sure you don't lose those if you want to fill them in. What you could also do is cut the pattern paper with the 2x2 die in set A and place that in the back first, and then place the Clover die on top of that. And then last you would fill in the photographs. So that is another way you can do it without trying to do what I'm doing and fill in these tiny little triangles. So I just didn't think about it until after I did it. But you live and learn. Alright, my page is finally finished and we have reached the end of the demo. Doesn't this page look amazing? I just love the Clover Die Set. It's awesome. It's definitely a great die for those of you who are more at an intermediate level with the Mosaic Moments scrapbook system. So definitely check it out. If you enjoyed seeing the Clover die, definitely give this video a thumbs up. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel so you can be updated whenever we add a new video. We pretty much add one every week. Also, before you go, let me know in the comments below if you liked seeing the die machine along with the layout. Did it help you understand using the die better? Let me know, or I can go back to the original way where I show them separately like in my past videos. Alright, thank you for watching today's demo. I'll see you next time.